Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Football Digest Extra Time. I'm Beren Cross. I'm a Leeds United club writer with Leeds Live, and I'm joined by Paul Brown, London club writer with the Daily Star. Paul, good morning. Everything okay?
Good morning. Yeah, very well. You?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Obviously, on the Leeds United beat yesterday wasn't quite what we were after. What were your initial thoughts on the game yesterday? Obviously, a 4-2 win for Arsenal at Emirates Stadium. What were your sort of main takeaways at full time yesterday?
Well, I wasn't that confident Arsenal would win the game, to be fair, going in. They'd lost two on the bounce, have looked very inconsistent, and while they've played well at times, especially going forward, they're always liable to make mistakes. And after what happened in the last game against Leeds with Pepe and the red card, you did wonder if there'd be a bit of needle again in the game. There was some talk beforehand that Leeds were quite looking forward to playing Arsenal, which a lot of teams say at times. Didn't quite work that way, so it was a bit of a surprise, I think, that Arsenal came away and pretty much destroyed them for 47 minutes or so. And then the strange second half when Bielsa comes into his own, refuses to change, they go and chase it, and for a while you're thinking surely Arsenal couldn't collapse and let this one go, could they? But they managed to hold on in the end. So it's a strange game, really, in all.
Yeah, at 4-2, you did start to wonder because, of course, the Helder Costa goal, the second Leeds goal, went in, I think, about 69th minutes. There was a good 20 minutes plus to play. And having watched Leeds, you did think two goals in 20 minutes is not beyond them at all with the way that we know Arsenal can be fragile and can collapse at times. So I did wonder, but in the end, of course, Arteta brings on El Neni, he brings Rob Holding on, and he just manages to shore it up and to see the game out. And I think in the end, Leeds probably ran out of a little bit of steam towards the last 10 minutes, and there wasn't a great deal of jeopardy in the final moments. But like you say, the damage was done early on, and especially in that first half. And as you say, we came into the game thinking that Arsenal's probably quite a good team for Leeds to play. I mean, Leeds, of course, were above Arsenal in the table. Technically, they're superiors in terms of the season so far, and 3 wins out of the last 4 for Leeds, which is probably as good as it's been form-wise this season for a promoted side. Obviously, it's been up and down for any mid-table team. And like you say, Arteta just got it bang on. I mean, I think Bielsa was very complimentary afterwards. I think he acknowledges that Arteta clearly prepared brilliantly, knew exactly how Leeds wanted to play, and just counteracted it effectively. I think from a Leeds point of view, the main issue, of course, was losing Calvin Phillips, which has always been a problem under Bielsa for the last 2.5 years. They don't have a like-for-like replacement, and Leeds just struggle so much to replace him. And yesterday they pushed Pascal Struijk forward, which then disjointed the rest of the defence, which had looked so good in recent weeks. The man that came out of yesterday with the big headlines, of course, was Aubameyang. I'm amazed to read it was his first hat-trick for Arsenal. I mean, that absolutely blows my mind. What's gone on with Aubameyang this season so far, Paul? I think anybody watching from afar can see the numbers haven't quite been there. Of course, he's been absent recently for personal issues. How big a factor will that hat-trick be going into sort of the final third of the season for him?
You'd like to think it would be massive because he's obviously looked a bit low on confidence for quite a long time, even before the recent issue with his mum and having to go abroad to care for her. It's hard to pinpoint one thing really that's gone wrong for Aubameyang. I mean, he signed a new contract, and a lot of people put it down to, maybe mentally you switch off or take your foot off the gas, relax a little bit when you know that everything is sorted there. But he's not really that type of personality, so it's hard to see exactly what had gone wrong for him from the start of the season. But he just hasn't been there at all, really. And when Arsenal struggle, he struggles. He's so important for them. I would say he's probably their only world-class player, really, the only player of that quality in the squad. You could argue maybe Thomas Partey is on a similar sort of level, but they've not seen much of him. So Arsenal look to him as a leader. He's the captain. He's the guy who's going to challenge for the Golden Boot every year in a good year. And for some reason, he's had his head down a lot. His body language just looked terrible. He hasn't looked mentally right in games. He just hasn't been involved. There have been times when they've been creating chances for him, and he's just not been putting them away. And you'd think, if he's not getting any chances at all, that's one issue. But if he gets chances and can't stick them in, that's a whole different kind of issue for him. So you'd like to think that now he's got that hat-trick behind him, that perhaps he's back to his best and we'll see him go on the run, because Arsenal certainly need him. I can't see Arsenal challenging for the top four or possibly the top six, unless Aubameyang scoring goals on a regular basis.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Aubameyang took his goals very, very well yesterday. I think Leeds sat off him a little bit, especially on the first goal. Illan Meslier, the Leeds goalkeeper, is the one that sort of generated a lot of the headlines from the Leeds end. Of course, played a massive part in all three of the first goals. And I think from a Leeds point of view, he's 20 years old. I think he's the youngest goalkeeper in Europe's Big Five leagues playing regularly. And I think Leeds they want everybody to buy into that process. I think you have to understand that a goalkeeper of that age, there are going to be ups and downs. And if you want to have a goalkeeper who's going to build there and be sculpted to be the team's goalkeeper for the next 15 years, then you have to ride that out. And unfortunately, you're going to get down days like yesterday. I think over the course of the season so far, he's been pretty good. No real issues to say. Like I say, he's just 20. I mean, yesterday, Niall Huggins came on for his Leeds debut, and he's 20. And when he came on, he looked like a child coming on, and it was a classic youngster making his debut with very, very few expectations. And it's strange how two human beings exactly the same age can generate such different expectations and reactions among the fan base. So, yeah, I think Leeds just didn't get going at all, but Arsenal deserve absolute credit. And as I say, I don't watch Arsenal for 90 minutes every single week, but Bukayo Saka, I mean, if we're talking about young people, how is he 19? Frightening. I mean, he could be their talisman for the next 15 years, couldn't he?
He's actually become arguably their most important player during the last down spell. He's the one that's really showed up most weeks. And when Martinelli came back from his injury and he suddenly looked, the business, and he was the one people started looking to. But since then, Saka is the one who's stepped up. He's just got blistering pace. He's being played on the right wing now, which seems to suit him a lot more than the other roles that he's played in. And he's got goals in him. He's the one who's been scoring big goals for him and setting them up for the games that they've won in recent times. I can remember a few months ago, people raving about him, saying, he's going to be the future of the left back position for England. I never once thought he was going to be a left back. I don't see that at all. Both Arteta and Gareth Southgate have mentioned that he's got a lot to learn defensively. And I remember on his England debut, Lee Dixon absolutely slaughtered him for a couple of early mistakes, heading one clearance back into his own box. But he's had a switch of position, and he just looks completely free, happy, confident, and absolutely flying. And I think when you play him further forward, closer to the goal, you can really see what he's got, because he's the one who's been unlocking defences for Arsenal at the moment. But as well as him in this game, Arteta changed it a bit, and there was a really good interplay between Odegaard, who started his first game, Saka, and Smith Rowe. I'm not sure if they'll carry on with that, with those three playing together. You could argue that Odegaard and Smith Rowe are a little bit similar, and then there may not be room for both of them in the same team, but it really worked against Leeds. I just wonder if losing Phillips had more of an effect on the whole team than perhaps we realised, because Leeds love to play out from the back, and some of those options just aren't there when you look up and having Phillips in there. It's a similar issue to Liverpool, isn't it? It's not just Liverpool have two midfielders playing at centre back, but those guys are not where they should be further up the pitch. So you're a little bit more limited.
I think you're quite right. I think the way you really can't underestimate exactly how much of an impact Phillips has on the team, and the way, like you say, they build out from the back. And as we all know by now, Bielsa has not changed in 2.5 years. It's just the way they play. They like to invite pressure. I mean, as I've already mentioned with Meslier, that's a position where pressure is invited deliberately. He will always play out from the back. He will always take those touches and have your heart in your mouth when he's got attackers breathing down his neck.
And there were times when that worked well. People will forget, because they were ultimately thrashed in the first half, weren't they?
Yeah.
It could have been worse. But there were times when they did get out and they were suddenly in 3-on-3 with the Arsenal back line. It didn't happen often, but there were a couple of times early in the game when that did happen. So the strategy works to a point, but when you can disrupt it and you don't have players in the positions where you're expecting them to be, if you're Leeds, it can be an issue.
Yeah, I think what we're finding is that with this man-to-man system, I don't know if you watched Match Today last night, but Ian Wright made a very useful analysis as well, is that when they're going man-to-man, all it takes is for one player to beat his man, and the sort of the deck of cards can come falling down. And we've found that quite a few times in recent weeks when they've lost, is that quite often there's a spare centre back on the opposition side, and if they're comfortable on the ball and they're happy driving forward out of defence, it can be a bit like a coach and horses through the middle of the pitch. We saw it at Old Trafford with Man United when they won 6-2. All it takes is for basically everybody to shift to the flanks. All the Leeds players go with their men. And if all it takes is for one player to beat his man, and you're basically through the centre of the pitch. And yesterday I found that with David Luiz quite a few times. I think once he ran Bamford off the ball, he had a lot of space to then drive into. Dallas and Click were really struggling with Xhaka and Ceballos, who I thought probably ran the game, to be honest. And I think that's where the match was won and lost. Arsenal were able to stop Leeds playing out from the back, and Leeds weren't able to stop Arsenal. And anytime the ball went into the Arsenal half, as you've alluded to, it just came straight back. And Leeds just, if you remember, like the first sort of, like you say, 40 minutes, Leeds just couldn't seem to get out of their third. It was just constantly either Meslier being pressed into kicking the ball into touch, or passing out to the centre backs, and then it being turned over in the middle. And it was just one of those days for Leeds. And I think as a newly promoted side, you're going to have those days. They really, really struggle to build up with their patterns. And Phillips is just so important to that. And as I say, Struijk has been tried there a few times now. I think he might well be the sort of the least worst option. But it's something they have to address in the transfer window. And pulling him out of central defence really, really hurt them yesterday, because Ayling was just getting used to playing at right back again. Shackleton did absolutely fine coming in at right back as the youngster. But yeah, just Arteta and Arsenal got it bang on. Then they caught Leeds on an off day, and Arsenal now looking ahead. I mean, Europa League and European football, of course, returns. So it's amazing what one win can do, can't it, Paul? I mean, suddenly now the perspective on what might yet happen in the sort of the final third of this season changes. What are the sort of realistic aspirations for Arsenal, and if they're going to try and aim for the Champions League, what is going to be the most realistic way of doing it? Because of course the top four is far from set based on how some of those top sides did over the weekend.
It's a very competitive season, a very strange season. A lot of strange things are happening. But I just can't see Arsenal finishing in the top four. They look a way off that at the moment. I think if you're talking about qualifying for the Champions League, surely the Europa League is their better, possibly their only chance at doing that. I know there are teams who look vulnerable in the top four. I just don't have much confidence in Arsenal to put a real run together that would get them in there. They would certainly need Aubameyang scoring pretty much every week and back to his best to do that, which is not impossible, but it hasn't looked totally likely this season. And you always feel like Arsenal have another dip in them. As well as they've played, they've had two quite big dips already this season and haven't really put any runs together that you think are going to push them right into that sort of reckoning. So I think if you're talking about the Champions League for Arsenal, you really need to be looking at trying to win the Europa League to achieve that. Arsenal are a team that want to be in Europe, that need to be in Europe. Every year they're not in the Champions League, they miss out financially and drift further away from their rivals. So it is the Champions League that Arteta has been appointed to deliver. And at some point, he's going to have to deliver that. Otherwise, he won't be in a job there any longer. It seems like he has the backing of the whole club. The players love him. He's managed to start getting rid of the people that he thought were a bad influence in the dressing room and that he knows don't have a future at the club anymore. And the hierarchy kind of put a lot of faith in him when they appointed him. To get rid of Arteta would kind of be a bit of a damning indictment of them. So there's no one saying his job is under threat really for the time being or in the near future, but ultimately he needs to get them in the Champions League to be Arsenal manager for any length of time, and that looks quite a long way off this season to me at the moment.
Is there a general acceptance then that Arteta's in a long-term project now? Because as I say, from afar he looks like the right man. He really impresses me with the way he talks. I love his discipline. I think it's a discipline that Arsenal have needed for quite a while now. Ozil's finally out of the door. Is it just a case of just allowing him the time to get that squad in place and shipping out some of the dead wood, bringing in the players he needs and changing the culture?
It is, and I think he will get that time. Even if they go on another downturn, it would have to be pretty horrendous for his job to be genuinely under threat this season, I think. I mean, they know he's a young manager. They know he has a lot of tinkering with the squad to do. It's going to take a few transfer windows before this Arsenal team looks the way he wants it, and I think the club accept that. So he will get, I'm sure he will get time. I see good things, I see bad things as well from what he's doing, but the fact that he's managed to get rid of the players who were just a drain on both the club's resources and probably on chemistry in the dressing room too, because when you're not playing and you're a big name player, you can't help but be, you know, a bad influence in some way, can you, just because you're there. Those things will help. So the squad is starting to look more the way he wants it, but they still have holes in some quite big areas. Beyond Aubameyang, who's been really badly out of form all season, they don't really have a recognised goal scorer to come in. They have two players now playing in key positions who are only on loan, and there probably isn't a massive chance that both of those players or either of those players are going to be at Arsenal for the long term. So Barlos and Odegaard are big question marks over what they do with their careers, but I'm sure, you know, in private, if not in public, they're both talking about wanting to make it in Spain rather than for Arsenal over the long term. So that also is an issue. Something needs to happen there. Arteta needs fullbacks as well, and he still has a little bit of an issue at the centre of his defence where Chambers is basically not going to get a look in anymore. So another player they'll try to get rid of, and Lewis is going out of contract. What do they do with him? Do they need to sign another centre back? There's been talk for months that he does want a bit of a revamp there, and that another defender could come in. So there are still big elements of the squad that need changing or fixing if you're Arteta, and I just think they're a little way off that core group of 5 or 6 teams who are in there every season at the moment challenging. Yeah. I like what he's doing as a coach. You can see that he's improving players, and you can see they're buying into the system. But a little bit like Leeds, it's a system that kind of needs to work perfectly for it to work. And when it goes wrong, it can look really, really bad. So there's no kind of middle ground at the moment. I don't think Arteta is a manager who's learned yet how to get something out of a game when his side are not doing what he wants, when his side are not playing well. Yeah. I'm not sure he's really discovered a way of either digging in and grinding a result out or changing the way they play to get something from a game. I think that's something that Arteta probably still needs to learn, but they are showing signs of being a good team, and you have to look at it from the fact that, you know, you've got a lot of young players there, Saka, Martinelli. I know they sent others on loan like Willock and Maitland-Niles, but Reece Nelson as well. There's a crop of good, young, homegrown players there who give Arsenal a very bright future because they're not at their peak yet. Give them 2 or 3 years and they will be at their peak, and then we might see a different Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of giving a manager time, I think Bielsa, they would give him 10 years if he was happy to sign it. I mean, he's obviously into his mid-60s now, so it's this horrible sort of jeopardy of every single season, because Bielsa, of course, goes on a sort of a rolling yearly contract, and every single summer we have the same debate of, you know, is he going to stay, is he going to go? I think the general interpretation at the moment is that he'll stick around at least for another season. I think he really needs to see the fans back in the stadiums. I think he's really missed that. He's a great romantic when it comes to the importance of fans in football, and how football is nothing without supporters. And having gone all the way through winning the championship without the fans in the stadium, and now into the Premier League, the promised land, the thing they've waited 16 years for, and not having the fans in the stadium, I think that's really hurting him. I think it's really, really upset him, to be honest, because that's what drives him. So I'm sure we'll get at least another year. But as you said with Arteta and the time given, I mean, I think it's just a year by year thing, and it's more sort of Leeds are on tenterhooks rather than the manager. I think the manager holds all the cards. But I mean, what a season it's turning out to be, to have won the championship, to have come up with still, I'd probably still say 80% of the squad was the squad that finished mid-table in the championship under Paul Heckingbottom in 2018. So the man is working absolute miracles with the players he's got on his hands. I mean, I know that since they've been promoted, and as the analysis has grown deeper into what Leeds do, and clearly people are pointing fingers at how, as you've said, if the system doesn't work, it really doesn't work, and it really can fall apart quite spectacularly. Hence, they've dished out quite a few hidings and taken a few, which is why the goal difference is so erratic. But I think it's easy to lose sight of what he's done with the players that are doing this. I mean, the fact that this group of players isn't getting battered every single week is astonishing when you look at their personal career histories. So I think providing he can stick around in the summer and Leeds can strengthen, which they're making sounds that they want to. Obviously, everybody had a pretty quiet January, but going into the summer, if they can go and make another 3 or 4 key signings as they did last summer, in a few of those positions, I think left back is a position they'll look to address. Central midfield, where Mateusz Klich is slowly but surely come under a bit more pressure now and doesn't quite look the same sort of nailed on selection that he has been under Bielsa. Then, I mean, the sky seems the limit. I mean, I don't know how you feel about Leeds generally, Paul, but from afar, they are a massive football club, aren't they? I mean, everything is there for it to be a success with the time that's needed to change a squad, isn't it?
Undoubtedly a big club, yeah. I was interested by what you said in terms of Bielsa holding all the cards. He really does, doesn't he? I mean, you can understand why, because he's completely transformed the club, and he came in when they were at a low ebb, needing that sort of transformation. And he's a big name guy with huge reputation, respected all over the world for what he's achieved and the style of football that he plays. But is it a healthy position for your manager to hold all the cards at a club? It isn't really. I think you're right. I think he will be around next season at least. But a guy like Bielsa, you just cannot predict what's going to happen with him. He's totally unpredictable. He could find a reason, in the next week for deciding that's it. I doubt it's not going to happen, is it? But you know what I mean. He's so unpredictable that you cannot plan for the future with a man like Bielsa. He seems to be really enjoying English football. So I think he's going to be around for at least another season, and he'll get a chance to team in the summer and see what happens there. But when you're in that sort of position where where your manager does hold all the cards, you have to start asking what happens to Leeds after Bielsa, whenever that is, whether that's 2, 3, 4 years time, because they're unlikely to be able to find someone who's going to take on the same kind of philosophy. Where do you find a manager who plays the same way and is any good at it like Bielsa is? So what do they do then? I would be wondering already, if you're the Leeds hierarchy and you're in the Premier League, what the long-term plan is there. I think there needs to be one. Totally accept that as a squad of players, if you look at them individually, it's not as if the top 4, top 6 teams are going to try and poach half this team, is it? I mean, he's worked wonders with a team that you look at and think, well, how has he done that in many ways? But at the same time, if Calvin Phillips is poached by someone at some point, which he's obviously the one that may be targeted by a bigger club over the next few months, what do Leeds do then? You certainly think he needs to find a solution somehow in the transfer market, whether Phillips stays or goes, because I see Leeds sometimes and it works and it's brilliant, but you think you have a back line at Leeds, and then you have the centre of the pitch that seems only populated by Calvin Phillips, and everyone else is pressing, press. And again, it's brilliant when it works. And I can remember when they played Everton in the first game, Everton had 2, possibly even 3 midfielders in there in the middle of the pitch, and yet Calvin Phillips completely ran the game. He was able to totally run the game on his own. He didn't need anyone else in there with him because he does a bit of everything. He can close players down, he makes tackles, he makes interceptions, and his passing range is absolutely outstanding. But again, long term, I think you've got to find someone of a similar stature to get in there with him, if only because he's not going to be there forever, let's face it. And when he's not in the team for injury or suspension or whatever, they need someone who can play a similar role or pick up where he's left off, so they don't end up looking like a completely different side. So he's got to find someone or some way of playing that fills that midfield with a similar sort of quality. But the future does look bright for Leeds. They're playing great football, and if he sticks around for long enough, I'm sure he can make them an even better team, especially if he's given the funds to improve it. I just always. Bielsa's been around for a long time, and so many jobs have come up in the Premier League, and I've always thought, I wonder if that club would go for Bielsa. And I think there have been a few teams that have had a nibble for him before, and you look at all those teams and the positions they were in, and you think, but with all of them, they were all in positions where perhaps they're struggling a bit in the Premier League, and employing someone like Bielsa at that moment would have been a massive risk. I mean, he was West Ham's radar, for instance, for a while once, and they were when they were struggling. And you think West Ham fans, I'm sure, would absolutely have loved Bielsa to go there, but could you really see that working? Because he's such in a way he's found the perfect club in English football, because he's been able to rescue them from a terrible situation when they were already down there and in need of something like this, and he's completely transformed them. And in a way, I think taking that job when they weren't in the Premier League has really worked for him. It's also meant he's had time and patience from fans and the owners to do this. And I'm not sure there would have been another club in English football that could have taken him and given him the same sort of platform, the same time, the same patience, and the same faith.
Yeah.
So it's just been made in heaven, strangely, because who would have thought before Bielsa ended up at Leeds that Leeds and Bielsa would have been a match made in heaven? It's almost inconceivable, isn't it?
It's as most managers say in the modern game, it's you pick your owners, not your clubs. I think Bielsa's a great example of that. I think, as you say, it doesn't strike me as a good match him with Mr. Gold and Mr. Sullivan. But when he's gone into Leeds with the ownership structure there, and as you say, they bow to him and give him everything he needs, and thankfully it's working. Because, like you say, Paul, when he first came in, we had no idea which way it was going to go, and we thought they would be just as likely be top of the table in September as they would be with him out of the door, gone in absolute acrimony, as we've seen with some of the stuff from Lille this week. I think Victor Orta, the director of football, is going to be the big thing that knits it all together, as you've said, with in terms of a succession plan, in terms of the transfer dealings. It's very much this modern way of he builds the squad, he does the personnel, he solves the Calvin Phillips problem, and basically they try and find a coach who can then come in after Bielsa and sort of do something with that group of players in their own way. I think they know Bielsa is Bielsa because there is nobody like him, and I think they know they're not going to get somebody in who's going to play in exactly the same way. And I'm sure they've got their feelers out and looking at exactly who could play in, if not the same, then a similar way. But Arsenal then. Who have Arsenal got next on the radar, Paul? Who's their next game in the league? I know it's Europa League first, but who's next in the league, and how's that game shaping up for them off the back of yesterday?
Well, like I say, I think it's all really down to Aubameyang and what he does. But unfortunately for Arsenal, their next game in the Premier League is City. So not the easiest. The easiest fixture to play. It's Europa League first, so they'll concentrate on that. But and Arteta has had some joy against the bigger teams. In many ways, his system and the way they play is better suited to playing some of the bigger boys in the Premier League. So who knows? But you look at City at the moment; they just look unbeatable, don't they? I mean, the run they're on. When the Champions League starts up again and they get bogged down in that may change, but it's hard to see City dropping too many points until that does happen.
Yeah, for Leeds it's Wolves on Friday, so going to Molineux, of course. Wolves who looks a bit out of sorts in recent weeks, to be honest. They got a good win yesterday at Southampton, from what I'm led to believe, against the run of play. To be honest, I think Southampton felt a little bit aggrieved, but yeah, I mean, I think now Leeds down to 11th behind Arsenal. Although if they win the game in hand, then they go above Arsenal again. So as I've already said, it's amazing what one result can do and just changes the perspective on things. But they're safe now. I think they may. I mean, with Bielsa, they may never be on the beach. But if you're looking at sides that are going to be in that safe mid-table section, Leeds are going to be one of those that probably sooner than others may have a little to play for and could well just be playing for Bielsa entirely and just basically listening to him scream from the touchline and hopefully getting a response. But no, I mean, I think in terms of final thoughts, I mean, yes, they absolutely justified for Arsenal. And as you say, I think the one moment was at 4-2. If they could have got that third inside the next 5 or 6 minutes, it might well have turned it. But in the end, Arsenal did a professional job, and I think more than justified it. And hopefully they can build on that now moving forward. But we'll leave it there, Paul. Thank you for your time. Thanks for joining. It's a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to talk football with you. And I'm sure we'll do it again sometime soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.